Hi everyone, Theresa with Garden Party Flower Farm and Open Food Network Canada. I'm looking a little windblown and wilted. I've been out harvesting, and before I put all these flowers in the cooler, I thought I would talk to you about Can Perennials Save You Part 2, where we'll look at summer flowering perennials. We already looked at the June flowering perennials in Part 1. You can go back and look at that. But now we're going to look at those perennials that can be useful to you from early July right through to the end of the season. I want to thank the Canadian Agricultural Partnership at Open Food Network Canada for making these videos possible. Just a quick recap, but I went through this in part 1. I think you know a perennial lives for multiple years. An annual's whole job, make seed, die. A perennial's job also make seed, but put strength into your roots so that your roots can live below the soil from year to year. So there are some real advantages to you as a flower farmer for doing that. Perennials mean you don't have to plant in the spring. Perennials often are flowers that aren't available in global chains, so you have kind of this captive flower that's hard to get anywhere else. Often a nostalgic value for some of them with consumers, I find. And they give you flowers, the summer ones give you flowers from before your annuals start in July, so you know you have that hole at the beginning of July, and after your annuals into late September and even early October. So there's a lot of advantages of perennials. Also, because we're focusing so much on beneficial insects, perennials are great homes for beneficial insects. So they're really punching above their weight out there on your farm. That doesn't mean that it's so easy, lots of challenges. They need excellent drainage. If you're growing on clay, you're going to have to amend your soil, grow in raised beds, or here's another thing, grow in very big pots. Buy big pots, the kinds that they sell big trees in, and dig a hole, sink that pot in the hole and grow your perennial in it. The reason you're sinking it in the hole is because you want the insulation value during the heat of the soil to keep the roots cooler. A great way to grow perennials if you have poor soil. The other thing about perennials that I said in part 1, I'm going to stress again, you got to make sure your site doesn't have perennial weeds. And I mean things like solidagos that spread by the root, runners that you see on grasses and things like that, thistle. You've got to get rid of those weeds. There's no sense planting a perennial bed on top of that. They're not going to compete with that. They're just going to come up through the weeds will come up through the perennials to drive you insane. And it's better to invest this time up front, get the soil right, get the site right, and then plant your perennials because they're going to be there for a number of years. So let's start with Yarrow. And I should have covered Yarrow in part 1 because it does usually start in June, but honestly, it doesn't make my top 15, so that's why I didn't talk about it then. But briefly, let's cover it because I know lots of you grow it. It's a tall, great filler, terracotta, summer berries, vintage series. These are some of the popular ones. There's some newer ones coming along. One thing, fall planting is a good thing to do because it does lead to larger blooms and fuller flowers, taller plants. The thing about Yarrow is it really needs constant division. 3 years is kind of at the outset. I divide mine every 2 years and start new plants from the divisions. And then every once in a while I refresh my stock with some new varieties and plant in the fall. If you cut it back after flowering, you are likely to get a second flush, depending on your timing and your zone and so forth. I find it can be weedy and kind of invasive, so that's one of the reasons it's not my favorite. It's nice for the few weeks that it blooms, in my view, and then, I don't know, sometimes it just looks a little ratty. Some people say that they can't get it to hydrate. So I don't have that problem. I think the solution there is really picking at the correct stage. So you want to pick yarrow when the pollen is visible on the flower. And you don't have to go out with a magnifying glass to look for the pollen. When you first look at yarrow, when it's starting to bloom, it has a brightness to it. And then in a few days, you'll notice that it starts to go a little dull looking. That dullness to the color is pollen. So when you see the dullness, that's when it's good to pick it. And as long as you hold it overnight in a cooler, which I think is necessary, it should hydrate fine for you. I'm going to start with coneflowers because they are, for me, an essential cut flower. And that's because, for me, they fill the focal flower void between peonies and the start of Lisianthus and dahlias. So that early July period where you really don't even have, I don't really have hydrangeas yet either. I find that the annuals haven't really come into their own yet, and coneflowers fills that void for me. They're very tolerant of drought conditions, which has been great the current year because we've had such drought. Once they're established, like any perennial, when you're establishing it, it needs tender, loving care. Coneflowers don't need netting, and yet they can get so tall. You have to look at varieties closely. There's so much breeding going on. When you see the description of a breeder and it says compact, okay, that's not what you want. That means short. So you want to look for varieties that are tall. There's other advantages to coneflowers. There's generally not imports that you're competing with. So if you're selling to designers, you have a bit of a captive market. I find that they never have hydration issues. Not like zinnias or Rudbeckia, which can have, it seems to me, a little bit of hydration problems. Coneflowers are always fine, and they hold longer in the cooler and longer in the vase. The one thing about them is I think you want to divide every 3 to 5 years, and you'll hear that for all the perennials I'm talking about. Division is your friend with perennials. If every flowers start to look a little shorter, really what you want to do is divide them and get them another start again. They're just getting a little tired. But I would say coneflowers is a great one, and I can share some of my favorites with you. I'm going to show you some of these in 1 second, but just as an introduction, there are so many new coneflowers. These are my current favorites, although they'll change next year, I'm sure. A lot of people are growing supreme cantaloupe. That's in your upper left picture. I'll also show you one in a minute. But it's a great coneflower. It's a double, which means it has that poof in the middle, and then the petals below. And shown with supreme cantaloupe there is big kahuna, which is a wonderful coneflower if you can find it. It's a little tricky to find. Very large, definitely peachy apricot focal. Beside that, mellow yellow. Now you'll notice this is a more yellow than the more cantaloupe picture I showed you earlier, because mellow yellow is a seed series, which means there's genetic diversity in there. And so you will get coneflowers from buff color right through yellow, right through to the cantaloupe, which is really nice. Same goes for Cheyenne Spirit, which is still one of my all-time favorites. Classic seed mix, so that means you can grow it by seed and you get that genetic diversity. If you want a little bit of all the colors, grow a mix like Cheyenne Spirit. Certainly tall enough to use as a cut flower, and you've got everything from the whites through to the corals in that mix. A new favorite of mine is one called Lemon Drop, and I'm going to show you this, a new very pale yellow double. Look for that one. And some people are growing the Sunseeker series. So Fresco Apricot and Sunseeker Golden Sun are in that series. The thing about the Sunseeker series, beautiful, beautiful colors, large flowers because they have the 2 rings of petals. They're singles. They're not doubles. They don't have the middle poof, but they have 2 rings of petals. But they are shorter than some of the others. I think tall enough for a cut flower, but just. Rudbeckia. And right away, some people call these coneflowers in common language, so don't get mixed up by that. Rudbeckia is a different species than echinacea, and you might call them both coneflowers. I sometimes call echinacea coneflower. but just watch your language on this. If you're looking to buy plants, you could get the wrong thing. So I love Rudbeckia, especially I love the yellows. They say summer to me when they start. They're cheery, definitely a focal when they first start, before the insects get to them and so forth, and very nostalgic for consumers, I find. Planting in the fall can result in taller plants, at least it does for me. So a lot of people will treat them as annuals, and that's okay too, or they will just leave them reseed and then move the seedlings to where you want them the next spring. They're readily available as seed, but also in plug sale, all the different varieties, the singles, the doubles, the browns, the yellows, etc. There are some downsides. Sometimes hydration can be a little bit finicky, not like coneflowers where it's never finicky, but with Rudbeckia sometimes you get drooping. I always just overharvest by a few in case I do see some drooping when I'm working with them. And the other thing that frustrates me a bit is the browns are beautiful, but I find they often just stay out there unpicked, because consumers aren't really looking for those brown shades until we get towards the end of August or into September, and by then the Rudbeckia are finished. So it's kind of a pity. There's a beautiful cherry brandy color, but I've just grown it so often and it hasn't sold because it's the wrong shade for midsummer, where people are looking for the brightness of the yellows perhaps. And if you wanted to get these Rudbeckia blooming later in the season, that's a bit of a chore. You have to modify day length when they're growing in order for that to happen, because they're a day length sensitive flower. So to talk about a couple of other flowers in this same family, echinacea, Rudbeckia, these are the Aster family. This is the loves me not family, I like to call it. There's two other species that might be useful to you, Helianthus and Heliopsis. So Helianthus, this is the same grouping as sunflowers, but this is not an annual sunflower. This is sometimes called perennial sunflower. Several varieties here. Very tall plants, deer resistant, which is lucky if you're plagued by those. 8-week bloom periods. Mine start in mid-July and they'll go almost to frost. They are a pollinator magnet. So these are good plants if you're really hoping to add beneficial insects to your farm as well, because these will attract them. Two varieties I like is Lemon Queen. That's the one that's showing. So it's a single, very much a sunflower and almost a Rudbeckia look. Loudon Gold is another one. These are more branched, so they're not single stem, single flower on a branch. You can pick a branch with multiple flowers, or you can pick a branch and trim it to have a single flower. But I find them useful. I start putting them in my mixed buckets in the middle of July. Heliopsis, a little bit different, a little shorter, also with a very long bloom period and also loved by pollinators. Asahi is my favorite, which is shown in the picture. It's this tangerine double, small hits. I'll show you an example. Very useful in bouquet work, I think. It just gives this nice different color in there. Goes with everything. Burning Hearts is a nice one too, a little bit more dramatic. Yellow and red in the middle. But Heliopsis is another one that really has saved my butt, I like to say, so many times when I've just been looking for a few extra stems and I haven't had my annuals in place yet, etc. So those are two additional Aster family perennials that might be helpful to you. So I'm going to show you some of these. First of all, I want to show you the double coneflower. So this is what I mean when I say poofy, because I don't know how else to say it. There's probably a technical word. This is double scoop raspberry. Double scoop strawberry, be a little brighter. Although on your camera this looks pretty bright. To my eye right now it's a little dull looking. But here's the lemon drop. So you see also poofy, also with the down and upper petals. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful color, and has been really nice in buckets and bouquet work for me this year. So those are what the doubles look like. Now I want you to compare to, this is Supreme Cantaloupe, which again is a double, but it's huge. Look at this, the difference. Supreme Cantaloupe keeps that tighter cone, doesn't get as shaggy. I think that's more desirable, this more desirable. And compared to the Lemon Drop, you can see how thick the down petals are on Supreme Cantaloupe, and on Lemon Drop they're kind of thinnish or whatever. Now the neat thing about coneflowers, I'm going to show you. So when I get a flower that's like this, where the down petals are starting to be passed, well, then you get to do, he loves me not. He loves me not. He loves me not. He loves me not. He loves me. Oh, good thing. We've been together 45 years. So what does a flower know anyway? But look at that. That's a different flower, right? Is that not a completely different flower? And you can do this. I wonder if I have a few around that I've been, when your coneflowers are just a little bit past, it's a little trick. And depending on the color of that inner poof, you get these beautiful varieties. So this is this is a variety called Fresco, but she has started to be passed. So we can just pull these off. Look at that, wonderful little button. So that's one of the wonderful things about coneflowers, is you can just keep doing that. There's some other nice ones. This is the salmon, Sunseeker salmon, and this is the Sunseeker Golden Sun. I think Golden Sun is an absolute beautiful, beautiful flower. Classic double row. Let me show you the bigger one. Classic double row of petals. That is classic to the Sunseeker series. Not as tall as something like Big Kahuna or whatever, but certainly tall enough to use in a vase. So I would really recommend some of these guys. The other thing I want to say about coneflowers, I don't know if I have an example of this. Oh, a little bit here. No. There is something called fasciation. And what fasciation is, it's kind of surprising that I don't have any here that I've picked that actually have it. It's unusual because it's very common. Fasciation is when you get variations in the, look at, you get that close up there. I'm being invaded. With fasciation, you get things, sometimes petals sprouting out of the middle of the cone, for example. I bet you've seen this. Or you'll get a cone that is oblong shaped instead of round shaped. I'm really surprised I don't have an example in all the coneflowers that I picked today, because no, okay. But what fasciation is it's just a reaction to stress, any kind of stress. We've certainly had heat stress out there for all the flowers. Some flowers are more prone to this than others. It's nothing to worry about. They'll pop back just fine. So coneflowers. I won't show you the Rudbeckia because I know you know what those are, but I wanted to just show you one of my favorites then. This is the Heliopsis. This is this is Asahi. And what gorgeous hits of color this is. Tiny little filler flower. I usually pull out this middle and then use that in the bouquet. You always are pruning up the bits that, on all these families, those little side buds will just cause wilting. So you're generally taking them off. But this is a lovely cone. You know how people are always shaking bouquets? It just kind of happens naturally for me. They shake on their own. So those are some of the coneflower, Rudbeckia kind of family. Phlox paniculata. So this is summer garden phlox, and one of my favorites, a great focal. if your dahlias haven't started yet or your Liz haven't started yet. For me, they start mid to late July and will go to frost if I keep cutting it right down at the base. It's nice because it's a big focal right when you need them. And there's tons of colors and varieties. The variety David is a classic white, a bright white. David Lavender is a lovely pink. And then there's any number of bicolors and so forth. New breeding for mildew resistance. People are often worried about mildews. I have to say I don't have a problem, but I also divide mine regularly. I always have a plot just coming and a plot that is at its peak. So I divide every 3 to 5 years, and I give space between them so that they don't get too crowded. And people worry about petal drop, but really if you pick them in the bud stage before they're open, you won't have any trouble with petal drop. But when you pick them, you want to pick them in bud and leave them open. If you're doing a bridal bouquet, you know, you want to pick them a couple days before in your cooler. They last a long time in the cooler. But look at these colors, really. Can you imagine? It's just so stunning. And they smell absolutely heavenly. There aren't that many cut flowers that smell anymore, you probably realize. These are gorgeous. I know people think they are mildewy, but really they're not. New breeding is bringing in so many new varieties. So if you haven't been growing phlox paniculata, garden phlox, I think you want to. So let's move on to Hypericums, because this is my new favorite. And again, I'll show you some of these in a second. Hardy to zone 5B for sure, maybe a little lower. I am kind of between an A and a B, and they're hardy for me in a protected spot, but I have heard other flower farmers lose them. So I think you're good to give it some protection. Mine are planted up against the side of a hoop house, so they're not inside, they're outside, but that means they get lots of good snow cover because the snow falls off the hoop house onto that space, and so they're always under snow, so they're insulated well. So I would suggest if you're in a zone 5 and you don't get reliable snow cover, you want to make sure you put mulch over them. They need time to establish. This is similar to lupins and some other perennials too. They need that vernalization period, that cold period, to stimulate blooming the next year. But they have to have a bulk to them first. They have to be big enough before the weather gets cold. So you don't want to plant Hypericum too late in the year. Plant it when the days are lengthening, and then they can experience the shortening days. That's great. And before the winter comes, and then that'll stimulate their flowering the next year. Pinching is recommended. I cut back each spring right to the base, and then the new stems come. There are 2 good series for this, and Hypericums are also a native plant, but that's not the variety we're using as cut flowers. The Brisk series and the Miracle series are both excellent. I'm going to show you them both. The Brisk series will be in the plug sale. It almost always is. The Miracle series is harder to find, and I'm still looking for that before we can get it again. Solidago, and here I don't mean the native variety of solidago, although some people use that, but I'm talking about cultivated varieties like the Danziger Glory series, other varieties like Fireworks and so forth too, that are clumping varieties, meaning they're not invasive, they're not spreading by underground runners, which you really don't want in your garden. Reliably hardy. There are some downsides to solidagos because people still think it causes hay fever, but honestly, in my experience, the cream ones, like the Glory series, that I'll show you in a sec, the cream ones, I think people don't even realize that they're solidagos. And keeping with our native grouping, of course, Asclepias, or butterfly weed, or milkweed. These are gorgeous natives and easily grown, easily sourced, and I think not used enough. They have a huge impact, especially if you pick them at the bud stage, because the buds look like little tiny berries almost. Pollinator magnets, great source for monarchs, but also to attract beneficials to your garden. And after blooming, the seed pods are also decorative, so you get that double use out of this flower. And there are some that are not invasive, and that's what you want to pay attention to. They'll spread a lot, but not invasively. There's the white that you see pictured here is ice ballet, but there's also the tuberosa series in the orange and in yellow, and the incarnata ones, which are in more of those pinks and purples. So I want to show you some of these things we just talked about. First, I'll start with the Hypericum. Look at this. You can see why it's become my new favorite. It has been, I've used this in buckets and been selling this for a month already, since the beginning of July. It is starting, the berries start to dry up and go brown, so they don't hold their color. I think I've got 2 weeks, and then that'll be it for this. But just to give you some of them, this is brisk lime, and what I do is, I will pull off a lot of the leaves so that the berries show up. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous green berry. We will have this one for sure in the plug sale, the Brisk series. I hope some others in the Brisk series too. I'm looking for ones in the Miracle series, and I can just show you, this is the Miracle series. It's a tad shorter, but still very, very tall. This is 50 centimeters. Miracle Horizon and Miracle Grandeur. I would like to get these again. I don't know if we'll be able to. I keep looking. I may try to propagate them. I don't know how my luck would be at that. But yes, Hypericums are definitely something you want to give a try to. We talked about the solidago. So just for reference, this is the native solidago. Yeah. Actually, it's not too bad right now when it starts like this. It's just starting to turn yellow, but you know that it'll get that rather unpleasant yellow color. But compare it to this, which is Moonlight Glory. I think I have another, just to give you a sense. Gorgeous, gorgeous cream colors. I picked them at about this stage. You can pick them earlier, but I like the cream just starting to show. Now, this is prolific. I think I mentioned you can treat this like a filler because you can pinch it so that you get, reasonable size shoots. And for me, this is parallel to how I might use feverfew or metricaria in June, that is as a prolific filler. And I think this is a prolific filler for this time of year. Goes with everything and very easy to grow. We'll have it in the plug sale too. I hope. Last year we couldn't get it. They're a little pricey, but I think they're worth it. So that's the Glory series. That's Moonlight Glory. And then last I want to show you some Asclepias. This is Soulmate. So gorgeous, rosy purple color. It's starting to open. The seed pods are starting to open. And I'll show you Ice Ballet. Ice Ballet is gorgeous. Just this lovely hits of white. It's very branched. It will branch lower. You can see where I cut them off, so you can get multiple per branch. You can also pinch it to get more single flower, taller ones. It does emit a sap, so you need to put it in a bucket for a little bit. It's not as sappy as Euphorbia, really. But Ice Ballet, lovely, lovely Asclepias. And, of course, the species, Asclepias tuberosa, in the orange. Really, really dynamic kind of color for this time of year. I'm partial to yellow and orange, but, there's not a huge demand for it. But if you've got a summer theme or a rainbow theme coming up, this is a great one for it. And I finally just want to show you what the buds look like. Sorry, not the buds, the seed pods. So I don't know if you can see. But you can see they're a little different than the invasive native one that you probably are familiar with. These will also pop open and, share the fluffy seed pods. But they're quite nice at this stage too, as, an interesting kind of texture flower. So let's move on to some perennials that bring texture into bouquets. And let's start with Echinops and Eryngium. I love Echinops for the color. It's that steel blue at a time when it's hard to find a true blue, with the exception of some delphiniums. But I find Echinops to be very useful. It's reliable, it's hardy, it's a tough plant. And it's readily available as plugs or roots, very affordable. You only need a few clumps of it. The benefit for me is it starts early July and continues. I'm recording second week of August right now, and there's some still blooming out there, although this is probably the last week for them. But the ones that I harvested first have still been holding in my cooler. So it holds for a very long time and has a long, long vase life. And you can harvest it with multiple flowers or single flower stems, so it has that versatility. Eryngium, which we commonly call glitter, there are many different varieties, but it's the glitter one that I think mostly we use as cut flowers. Comes in a white and a blue, and again, it's that amazing textural interest in a bouquet. Readily available and reliable. It also holds well in a cooler, and both of these flowers are really great if you're drying. Sedums, another great flower for that textural interest. One of the few cut flowers that has those succulent leaves, although you're often pulling the leaves off to get the head in your bouquet. Easy and hardy, very drought tolerant plant once it's established. You can be a focal or smaller buds can be in there as hits of color as a filler. And the nice thing about sedums is you can pick it at all the stages. It's not like one of those flowers that has to be at a certain stage to be able to hold up. You can pick sedum right from the time when it's first green, right through to its deep color, right through when it's basically past its main color and now is into the faded browns and burgundies and so forth. Lots of varieties. You want to watch the variety descriptions because there are many that are short and bred for landscape plants. You want the ones that are taller. Autumn Joy, Neon, Autumn Fire, Purple Emperor, Night Embers. There's several. And they're great for late July right through to September, and you can divide them as you like and increase your supply quite easily. And the final perennial we'll look at for this textural interest is, of course, the fall anemone or the Japanese anemone. Fantastic perennial to end the season with. My earliest varieties start the first week of August. So the first week of August is generally the first time I harvest anemone for buckets or for designers. And usually starting with Rudbeckia, which is the first variety to bloom for me, and that's the variety in the picture. But I will have Japanese anemone now blooming until frost takes them. So we start with this pale mauve one that I've pictured there, but really it will move into the doubles and the singles, in the whites, in the more pinky shades and so forth. Harvested for the buds as well as for the flowers, and many still keep the seed pods on as well. There are some downsides. It can be invasive. It spreads by underground runners if it likes where it is, so put it in a place where you can mow around it or something. And it does need netting. If I leave mine not netted, they just flop and pick up insects, so that's not very helpful. People say it can be hard to hydrate. I haven't had a big problem with it. I think with anemone, you want to make sure you put it in the cooler overnight. It's one of these flowers that really benefits from that cooling period. The cooler overnight. So let's just look at some of those. Here's the sedum. This is Autumn Fire, but again, first week of August, still green. But that's, that is a focal size flower, and once this starts to pink up and red up, it'll be gorgeous. Echinops. So echinops, you can harvest them like this, with the multiple stems, multiple blooms per stem, I would sell this as a focal kind of line flower to designers. And then there's this. You can harvest just the single ones. You can see it's starting to bloom up. These will keep in your cooler for a month, easy. And then when you take them out, the blue will be intense. And Eryngium, I have the white and the blue. The white is taller because it's second year. The blue, I just picked, I'm getting ready to sell perennials. So it was blooming in the pot and I cut these off, the blue. But they're very subtle colors. And lastly, we talked about these guys, the fall anemone. Okay, here's the bounce. See, I could shake bouquets just like all of you do. But you don't have to because flowers shake on their own. But the fall anemone is a gorgeous, gorgeous flower. And of course, people are buying it for those pods as well as the flowers. So if you don't have fall anemone, it's a good one to add, even if you're just adding a few. I want to go on and just talk about some things I didn't mention because there's a whole lot more. A couple of things. People always ask me, do I grow baby's breath, Gypsophilia, perennial? And I do, but I want to show you the difference. So this is a baby's breath variety. I think this is Summer Sparkles. You can see some white. But if you compare, this is Million Bells. This is a Danziger bred baby's breath. I believe if you're going to grow baby's breath, it's well worth going with the hybrids. Again, they're dear to buy, but they grow the same as the others. They're tough plants, and I think they pay you back. I'm so glad I've planted Million Bells, although now I want to get some of the others as well. I didn't even talk about Delphinium. I don't have any to harvest today, but I wanted to show you this. So this is called Jenny's Pearl, comes in a pink or blue, and again, we usually have this one in the plug sale too. This is a lovely kind of Delphinium, topping out at 35-40 centimeters, so big enough for bouquet work, and gorgeous, gorgeous color, and kind of comes at a nice time as a perennial where you're looking for something soft and light like this. This is actually the pink, but it's such a pale pink. I have used it in white blush buckets many, many times. Something you might not know. Oh, they're all. Sanguisorba. This is a variety called Pink Tana. I don't know if you can see. I can't hold it still enough for you because it's dancing, it's dancing. But it reminds me a lot about, now this is a little wilted, Gora, which is another, dance above the bouquet. These are nice, flouncy. You only need a couple clumps of them really, but they're very versatile. And I want to show you Veronicastrum. This lovely lavender, this is a variety called Fascination. I have cut off, there was a single bloom when it first started up here, but I think I showed you with the Veronica in the June recording that you can get more life out because the first to bloom will also be the first to seed, and then you have this big long thing with seed. But if you cut it, and I cut them down out in the field, it's kind of like pinching dahlias or disbudding chrysanthemums or peonies, one of those things that we do. You get this nice little cup flower, like a claw. It's my first year growing Veronicastrum, but definitely going to do it more. Oh, here's one. Here's one before the cut, you see. Another one that is worth having at least a patch, Thalicrum. Really talk about big, airy. It's like this giant lilac baby's breath, but taller and strong stem. Really a nice one if you sell to designers who do event work, or if you do event work. A little tougher for bouquets because the side branches aren't really tall enough when you pick them off. It's barely tall enough for in a bouquet. If you needed to tuck a little bit in there, you could, but I mean, if you were using it for a bouquet where you would sacrifice all this and use that, for example. It's a flower massacre, isn't it? People tell me I manhandle them. They're plants, folks. They don't feel it. Really. They're not people. No, Hypericum is beautiful. The thing I love about Hypericum, over 6 feet in the landscape, this cloud of lavender in the distance when I look out my window. Definitely a favorite and definitely one to add if you don't have it. Here's another. I'm new to this, calamint. So another airy filler in white. Barely see the flowers. You need a number to make a bouquet, but when you see a whole bunch of these together, they're really quite spectacular. A lovely one to add if you don't have it. If you don't have apple mint, of course you want apple mint. This time of year, mine is just starting to bloom, and so, oh, this smells heavenly. Just beautiful smell. What else haven't I mentioned to you? Oh, here. This is cardoon. So it looks like artichoke, but look how much taller. This is over 50 centimeters. They're very big. And of course, this gets this massive purple flower. I never use it for the flower, though. I harvest it at this stage. This is quite a small one. Actually, they get much bigger than this. And I've cut off the side buds. But, you know, they get branches like echinacea. They're hardy for me. They winter over here in zone 5A. So easy to start from seed. So it's one that you might think about if you're looking for something along those lines. I think I'm running out of my, oh, I didn't talk about lilies. Darn. One thing I wanted to just highlight for you is alliums. I talked about alliums in the first one. Look, these guys are all, they keep creeping into your view. Go away. I talked about alliums in the first recording and said how indispensable they were for me. And I still have alliums. I have had alliums available to me to put into my, I do mostly buckets and a flower bar, every week since, well, I think they were like the first thing I had after tulips. So the allium family is your friend. Absolutely. Get to know it. And get to know this one, because just when you think all the alliums are done, and even though they hold in your cooler for ages, and the summer alliums, you have this one, right? This has been in the cooler for probably 3 weeks, and look, it still looks great. This is actually, okay, here's a secret. This is elephant garlic, which is, yes, it's an allium, but it is a beautiful flower. It's this lovely lavender, and it's late in the season. This has been in my cooler about a week, so if we hadn't had a heat wave, it would still be blooming out there. But I harvested them because they go to seed very quickly in the heat. So alliums can continue on and on and on. And we could go on and on and on about more perennials, but I think we have to stop there. And it's been ever so much a pleasure to talk to you in my messy packing shed and my windblown look here. If you found this and you're looking for more, this video has been part of a project that we call Open Flower Network, which is a project of Open Food Network Canada for flower farmers in Canada. And you can find all these resources by going to our webpage and looking for the project. And this is how you do that. You go to openfoodnetwork.ca. That's our main e-commerce site. But look under the About tab and look for projects, and there you will find the Open Flower Network project and all of these resources and links to all of the YouTubes as well. Thank you.